Hello and welcome to Bytesize History, History of the United Kingdom, brought to you by AI Cast. I'm your host Aidan. In this episode, we'll be exploring the geological and climatic changes that created the landmass that would become the British Isles. The British Isles are a group of islands located off the northwest coast of continental Europe. The main islands are Great Britain, which includes England, Scotland, and Wales, and Ireland, as well as numerous smaller islands. The geological history of the British Isles spans hundreds of millions of years, from the formation of the ancient supercontinent of Rodinia to the present day. Over this time, the region has undergone numerous changes, including the movement of tectonic plates, the rise and fall of sea levels, and the effects of glaciation. The earliest geological era that can be identified in the British Isles is the Precambrian era, which began around 4.6 billion years ago and ended about 541 million years ago. During this time, the British Isles were part of a vast supercontinent called Rodinia. The landscape was relatively featureless and flat, and there were no fossils left behind from this time. The rocks from this era can be found in the northwest of Scotland, in the Hebrides, and on the west coast of Ireland. During the Paleozoic era, which began around 541 million years ago and lasted until about 252 million years ago, the British Isles experienced a series of geological events that would shape the landscape. The first event was the Caledonian orogeny, a mountain-building event that occurred around 400 million years ago. This produced the Scottish Highlands and other mountain ranges in the British Isles. During the Devonian period, which began around 416 million years ago and ended about 359 million years ago, the British Isles were situated in the southern hemisphere, close to the equator. The climate was warm and wet, and the landscape was covered in dense forests. The rocks from this era can be found in Scotland, Devon, and Cornwall. The Carboniferous period, which began around 359 million years ago and ended about 299 million years ago, was a time of great change in the British Isles. The climate was humid and tropical, and the land was covered in dense forests of ferns and giant trees. These forests eventually became coal, which played a significant role in the Industrial Revolution centuries later. The coal fields of England and Scotland were some of the most productive in the world during the 19th century. The Permian period, which began around 299 million years ago and lasted until about 252 million years ago, saw the formation of the Zechstein Sea, which covered much of northern Europe, including the British Isles. The sea left behind large deposits of salt and gypsum, which can be found in the northeast of England and the east coast of Scotland. During the Mesozoic era, which began around 252 million years ago and lasted until about 66 million years ago, the British Isles experienced a series of geological events that would create the landscape we see today. The first event was the breakup of the supercontinent of Pangaea, which occurred around 200 million years ago. The British Isles began to separate from the rest of Europe and move westward. The next event was the formation of the North Atlantic Ocean, which began around 55 million years ago and is still continuing today. The separation of the British Isles from mainland Europe was complete, and the region began to take on its current form. Around 2.5 million years ago, the British Isles were subject to the forces of glaciation, which shaped the landmass into the familiar contours we see today. During this period, the region was covered by huge ice sheets, which carved out valleys and left behind ridges. When the glaciers retreated, they left behind vast amounts of debris that filled in valleys and created new land. This is why the landscape of the British Isles is so varied, with rugged mountains, rolling hills, and flat plains. The most recent period of glaciation occurred around 20,000 years ago during the last ice age. At this time, the British Isles were connected to the European mainland by a land bridge called Doggerland, which is now submerged beneath the North Sea. As the ice melted, sea levels rose and the land bridge disappeared, leaving the British Isles separated from the rest of Europe. As the climate continued to change, the British Isles became home to diverse ecosystems and a wide variety of plant and animal life. This unique environment would eventually be inhabited by human beings, who would leave their mark on the land and shape its future. That concludes our episode on the geological and climatic changes that created the British Isles, and the rich natural and cultural heritage that has shaped the region's history. Thank you for listening. If you liked the show, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time on Bytesize History.